Thank you for coming, Georgina.
You're welcome, Luca.
I have this question. I actually am a Christian. I believe in the Catholic faith, but my deeper feeling are that there is nothing after the death. How would you address this question that is actually impacting not only Christianity, but I would say many of the religion?
I think it's a human question, actually. I think that even like in the old philosophers or whatever, and it is a question that every human being wonders about at some stage. And actually, when people speak about religion, they say one of the questions that leads people to some kind of religion is this big question: why am I here? What is my purpose? Do I just finish when I die? Is that the end?
Yeah.
And many, like we call it, let's say, non-believing people, for them it's the end. And I know in some cultures they have no funerals anymore because they don't believe that there's any point in it, you know, and that they feel there's no point in having a funeral and pretending to the family that all will be well and that you will meet again one day, because they don't believe it. And so they think, why should we go through this ritual which means nothing, you know? So I've come across people, which was very strange for me, that they don't have any funeral rite at all. The person dies and the body is taken away and cremated, and then the ashes might be scattered somewhere or something, but like there is no ritual because people feel there is nothing, so why should I pretend, you know? But you don't feel like that, do you, Luca? In your own heart now?
For me, I have no proof in the world that there is something after the death.
Yeah.
So I know this from the faith, and I try to believe, but for me there are many things like God knows me and will help me in my life and to go also through the death. But how could God knows all the people that live since the beginning of the earth? I mean, there is estimate that there are 100 billion people. How could God knows 100 billion people and 100 billion hearts?
Yes.
So what is your experience? I would say, if somebody from the dead came to you and spoke to you ever, or you are not afraid of the death, and because many also recent philosophers, we can speak about Heidegger, see only the last barrier.
Yes.
And rationally we cannot see anything else.
Yes.
Why? How the religion not prove but come to believe that there is something after the death?
I think you touched on something when you spoke about God, because if one believes in God, then it changes totally our understanding of a human being. But if we don't believe in God, then of course, like if we just believe in nature or the powers of nature, we know there are billions and billions of galaxies, not only people, but galaxies and outer space. They are still, it can take a spaceship a year to get to some point, but it's only beginning. It's not anywhere like even beginning the expanse of the universe. So I think when we speak about life after death, it has to do very much with, you mentioned God, because if there is no God, and if the universe is just chance, or is just what we call nature, then what is life after death, you know? But you mentioned God, and I think the feeling of believing that there is something after death is very connected to whether one has faith in a God or not. Because, for example, even we read about like very early civilizations that they would say that like since I read about, for example, the American Indian people, that they would go to the happy hunting ground, you know, like, or with the people in Africa, they go to their ancestors, but at least they thought that the ancestors existed, or the pharaohs, when they were buried, they buried things with them, you know, that they would have in the next life. But that is a kind of a prolongation of this life. But I read, and I think it is true, that if people are finding it very difficult to believe in God, or the God as we presented him, let's say, then of course they cannot believe in life after death. Because what would there be? But if we believe, you say you're a Christian, yeah?
Yes.
And as far as I know, the Christians, they believe that the human being is made in the image of God. So if we talk about God, we have a very different concept of who is a human being, what is a human being. But if we have no image of God or a transcendent, then we have a different image of the human being. And the human being, if a human being is just like a sophisticated animals, well then we wouldn't believe in a life after death. But if you believe in a transcendent, or like something higher or greater than us, then we believe also that a human being is a very complex creature, and that is different from the animals in what we call having a soul. And a soul for us is like a spiritual part of the human person. And we believe that animals have consciousness to a point, or we must treat them well, and they have certain emotions and so on, of course. But a human being is different. And if you look at a child, there is something different, you know, they are not the same. And if we can believe that we have a soul, then I think we can start asking about questions about what happens to this soul. But if you don't believe if we don't have a concept of some kind of a belief of a transcendent, something beyond this material world, then of course there is no life after death.
But still, going a bit deep on the Catholic theology, if I'm not mistaken, expressed that we will resurrect with the body. So what does it mean for you? Because many times I wonder myself, will I resurrect with the body when I was 20, when I was 30? A friend of mine got an accident and now is not anymore consciousness.
Yes.
And so will he resurrected when is as an handicap, or will he resurrected as a conscious man? The child that they don't have conscious, how will they resurrect it? I mean, the faith said that we will resurrect in the body. What does it mean?
Yes. So I think we have to say, for example, we are wondering if there's something after death. So then we are wondering if there isn't a transcendent, we call it God, or let's say Muslim people might call it Allah, or some other faith might call it by a different name. It doesn't really matter what we call it, because in the Christian faith we've learned to call God Father. But in other faiths they don't use that expression. But the important thing is, like now we are one world really, and we are mixing with many faiths and people without faith. And the big question is there a transcendent? Is there God? And if there is God, then God is not a human being. And God is way, way, way beyond anything that the human mind can encompass. So I understand your thing about if God exists, how can he know everybody? I went through that myself once. I said, I can believe in God because all around me there are proofs that there must be some intelligent, loving power, you know, in the world. But I said to myself, how can God know me? And I think actually that one has to have some kind of personal experience. It doesn't have to be something dramatic or very huge, you know, visions or something. But I meet many people and they say, like they might be in the forest walking, and somehow they feel a kind of presence which they know is greater than themselves, you know, or they're listening to music or something, and somehow they have a sense that there's somebody there, there's something there. And I remember once a scripture scholar teaching us about, like Moses in the wilderness, and he saw this bush, and the bush was on fire, but the bush was not burning. And he went and to see this bush, And I think something like that has to happen. We cannot convince a person that God exists unless they have some personal touch from God.
But I also had this personal touch from
Yes,
God, if
yes.
I may say,
Yes,
because I had the feeling that God was very close to me,
yes,
and God kind of spoke to me.
yes, yes.
But in the same time, believing, one thing is to believe that you live, that exist, but that this God will manage to bring you in another dimension, in another life, or will resurrect your body, or will take care of your soul. This is
Yes.
another step.
It is another step. And may I ask you, would you mind sharing, what was this personal experience that you had that convinced you, for example, at a personal level, that God exists? We can still have many, many questions, because faith is about deep mysteries, you know. And a mystery for me is mystery, is something that, it doesn't mean that you can never understand it, but it's like something that you can understand more and more and more and never come to the end of it. So I would, if you don't mind, would you say what kind of experience
I
it was?
I would say I was in a kind of distress, and I was not very comfortable, and I felt this voice on the background, do you trust me?
Yes.
And I said no.
Yes.
Do you trust me? No.
Yes.
But this voice was coming, do you trust me? No, I don't trust you. But this voice was coming very gently and very
Yes,
softly.
yes, yes,
Do you
yes.
trust me? Like,
Yes,
don't
yes.
worry, trust
Yes,
me. It
yes,
was
yes.
more an advice
Yes,
than a
yes.
question.
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
I remember
Yes.
this, and this was for me a very touching moment.
Yes.
And although I would say I experienced the God voice,
Yes.
in front of the dead, everything disappeared.
Yes, yes. But I feel I'm not forgetting about your question. I'm not forgetting your question about resurrection and so on. But I come back to the point that if we have some personal experience, I was speaking about Moses, you know, that he saw this bush was not burning, and he went close, and he had a revelation of God. We are not told that he had anyone before that, but this experience, he saw this bush, and then he heard in his mind, in his consciousness, a voice that said to him, don't come any nearer, take off your shoes.
Yeah.
You are on holy ground. And there was a sense of mystery, a sense of awe. And this sense taught Moses that there is God. God is. And I think somehow or other, every human being has to have some personal experience. It can be like you've described, something very short, but we never forget it. We remember where we were, we remember how old we were, we might even remember the day and the time, because it's so personal and so deep. And this scripture scholar used to say, everybody has to have their burning bush. If you don't have your burning bush moment, you will be believing intellectually, but it won't affect your deep, deep convictions. But if you have it once, you are still filled with doubt, you know. We're filled, like in the gospel they tell the story about one of the apostles, Thomas, you know, and he'd been with the Lord for a couple of years, but he didn't believe, you know. He said, I want to see, I want to see, I want to touch, I want to know, I don't believe, you know. So I think it's very good to talk about these things, because many people today, they have these deep questions, but they don't know where to ask them, or we don't want to give people just dogmatic answers. The answers have been repeated many times, but they must speak to the heart of the person, to the person's experience. And the person may have had, as you say, something. And you even hear of small children, you know. And many people come to the faith and they say, since I was a child, I felt there was something. And I've met a person, for example, her family had no faith whatever. But this woman, when she was a child, she used to speak to somebody, and it wasn't just a fairy tale, it wasn't just imagining she had a little friend, like many children do that. But she had this conviction that this was, she didn't know what to call it, but it was God for her. As she grew older, she said this was an experience of God. And I think if we can somehow come in touch, it's a gift, of course. We can't engineer it, you know. We can't engineer it. And when people tell you about their experience of God, it's usually a surprise, you know. They don't expect it at all. It comes out of nowhere. And if one can be blessed with something like this, then one can begin to believe, you know. But I think preaching to people or telling them the dogma or reciting our creeds, no matter what the faith is, you know. I've met people too who are...
It's an ideology.
Yes, or I've met people, for example, who are in their family Muslim, but they don't connect with it, you know. Most of course people do, that's their faith, and they believe in God. Or Jewish people or Hindus or whatever, they have their own faith. But if it's not personal, if it can remain, this is what I think is happening in the world too, that many people were connected to God, because everybody in the village did it, or everybody in the country did it. Like, I remember hearing that, for example, when missionaries went to Africa, that the government would say, you go to these people, this particular ethnic group, you belong to this faith, go and tell them about your faith. And if the chief accepted it, the people automatically became that faith. Or
it was also in the medieval time.
Yes, it was like it was a social thing, it was a cultural thing, and it helped politically. Because, like I think in France they say, one faith, one law, one king, you know,
yes,
like in French. So that was a kind of a bonding. But now we're in a different world altogether, a totally different world. And a friend of mine used to say, our God is too small. We can, like, use question, how can God know 1 billion people? But God made everybody. So he knows us intimately.
100 billion.
100 billion.
Yes,
or even if it was a billion. What's the problem for God? If he's God, he's beyond anything we can ever conceive.
Mm-hmm.
And he made, if we believe in God, we believe that God created everything. And if God created you, he knows you intimately. He knows you intimately. Everything you're thinking. I remember as a child we learned, like, God knows everything. I say, everything? Yes, even your most secret thoughts, you know. And we were, that was a bit scary, you know. But if you think of it like from a positive point of view, to be known by God as a human person,
yeah.
This is something extraordinary.
Yeah, it's relaxing.
It is relaxing. It is comforting. It is wonderful. So my question, do I think there is something after death? I think the answer is, do I think there is God? And if there is God, and he has created me, for what purpose? Why did God create me? For what? Like, if he's only creating me to, like a flower, there are many beautiful things that God created, flowers and trees and rivers and water. And they are in some, I think in the Bible they say that the furniture that God put to create human beings out of, when he had made all the furniture, it says in the old translation, then he thought about creating human beings. And he created them in his own image and likeness. So there is something deep in the human being that longs for God, whether we know it or not. I remember once I lived with homeless people, and they would say, why are you happy? You know, I said, I have no reason to be unhappy. And they used to say, you are lucky. You are lucky because you knocked on the right door.
Uh-huh.
He said, we're all looking, we're all knocking. He said, one person said, for example, had been drug addicts, they had been alcoholics, they had been compulsive gamblers, they had broken marriages, they had many things.
Oh, okay.
And then that was their problem. They would say, you are lucky, but we knocked on the wrong door, which means they were still looking for something.
Right. But then a question again that I cannot understand myself. If God is this big, mysterious and beautiful and loving father or mother, and why don't we run to God, but we run to sex, money, power, drugs?
Yes.
Why the human heart is inclined to the war and not to the peace of God?
Yes.
And why we don't, but even myself. There are 2 points why we are not happy. Oh, let's pray 3 hours.
Yes,
While we
yes,
can
yes.
say,
Yes.
let's go for the swimming pool and sauna 2 hours.
No
Or
problem. No
why,
problem. Yes, yes.
why we cannot say, oh, I'm so happy that soon I will die, that I will finally visit God.
Yes,
Why
yes, yes,
there is no this feeling in the present
yes, yes,
and in the
yes,
future?
yes. And I think myself that it has a lot to do with our environment, you know, that we don't have, let's talk about the modern times, okay?
Yeah,
We
but
are-
I think the past was even worse, I suppose,
Yes.
because now...
Yeah, but as regards finding God,
Okay.
yes, because the philosophers also, like the Greek, you know more about this than me
Yes.
because you studied philosophy.
Correct.
But you could tell me, for example, you can mention, like Plato and these people, they asked this question, didn't they? What is a human being? And
Correct.
so what did they say? What did these would say? They're not Christian, they're pre-Christian, but they were very...
I mean,
learned a
the
lot from them.
higher answer is probably Aristotle that
Yes,
says
yes, yeah.
is a rational
Yes.
animal.
Yes,
so
yes.
it's not only an animal, but
Yes.
has some reasoning.
Yes, yes.
And then probably later some consciousness.
Yes.
But then again, if you don't have the consciousness, then you are not a human being. So a child, or again a
Yes.
disabled, or an
Yes.
old man that lost his brain is not anymore a human being. Yeah.
Yes, but it was a certain, at least he was asking the question. And like
Yeah.
Plato and these other philosophers that you have studied, like the Greek philosophers, for example, what would they worry, what was their question, their deepest question?
The deepest questioning were more, I would say, what it was around the polis, what is justice,
Yes, yes.
and how to rule a policy, how
Yes,
to rule
yes,
a
yes.
city,
People, yes.
or then later with the medieval time the question were more theological, and then
Yes,
you know
yes,
more.
yes, yes.
But in the ancient time, yeah, what is the human being?
Yes.
They also ask what is God, but more in a theoretical way,
Yes, yes,
with
yes.
not big feeling, and
Yes,
not
yes, yes,
founding any religion.
Yes,
I mean,
yes, yes.
no philosopher ever
Yes,
thought
yes.
to start a religion.
Yes, yes, yes,
This
of
is
course.
only...
But they were asking the deep questions. And this is what I think is very important for us as human beings in the 21st century. To ask ourselves, are we asking the deep question? You know, before we can say, is there something after death? We can say, who are we now? What am I now? Why am I here? Am I just going through life? Some people would say, I want to leave the world a better place. But is it just repeating, and we just make the better place, and then we finish, we die, and then the next human being, our children, our grandchildren, will try to make the world a better place? And many ideologies, as you say, they have tried to make the world a better place, but failed miserably, you know, in some cases, because they didn't respect the humanity. Yeah. So for me, if you ask me about life after death, for me it's a question of what do I believe is a human being? And if I believe, like Jewish people or Muslim people or Christian people, I think, believe that the human being is made in the image of God. That means we believe in a transcendent, loving creator.
So
Yes.
when nowadays people don't recognize female or male,
Yes.
they are in the image of God because God is not female nor male.
It's true.
Is this?
It's true. But we used to say, how is God, how is the human being, how is the human being made in the image of God? And as you say, God hasn't a body to begin with. God is not male or female. God is spirit. God is spirit. So he doesn't have a body. Though Christians believe that God became
So it's
a planet.
not binary.
We actually, Christians believe
Because
that...
for Aristotle there was clearly the man and the female.
Of course, yes, of course.
Because it was an older
Yes.
society.
Yeah, that is a question that we could debate another day, you know, but it's like it goes down a very big,
I can imagine.
but we have to, like for today our topic is there life after death? And my answer is, if I can believe in that a human being is made not just with mind and reason, not just rational,
Yes.
but somehow spiritual. And that spirit means you have a soul. And some philosopher, I don't know who it was, because you know, said if you deny God, if you cut out God, you deny humanity, you know, because human beings, if you have a feeling that, if you have a belief somehow that human beings are more than material, that they have a spiritual element. But if you don't, if you say there is no such thing as God, no such person as God, then you automatically have to deny that the human being have a spiritual element, if there's no spiritual. But some of the old ethnic people, they have names, different names.
But the issue is many philosophers believe in the spirit, for instance, in the modern time. The point is an individual spirit that is put by God in you when you were born, and then it will go back to God as an individual. Because we will not go in the sea of the dead. We will be in the God's hand. We were in the God's hand, and we will. So one thing is to believe that there is some spiritual level, and this many people would agree, even people that don't believe in God. But believing that there is a spiritual, and this spirit is the spirit of Georgina, and in 100 years there will be still the spirit of Georgina. This is a more difficult thing to understand.
It is, and I don't know much about the Hindu faith or the Buddhism. I admire both, but like some, as far as I know, some faiths believe, like they believe in reincarnation, for example. That you have a spirit, you have a soul, and that when this body can no longer support your spirit because it's old or damaged or accident or something, your spirit will come back again into this world in another form. And according to your life, you will be either in a higher level or you'll be in a lower level. You know, if you have lived a good life, then maybe you will move up to a higher grade of being or something. But if you've been a bad, you will go down. Or, for example, some believe that there is a transcendent, but that we'll be lost like a drop of water in the ocean. Like when the river flows into the ocean. In the beginning you can see where it flows in, but after a while you can't distinguish the water from the water, the salt and the fresh water. It all becomes salt water. And some people believe that when we die, our soul goes into some kind of ocean of spirituality. But for believers who believe in God, God is a person. God is not just an energy. God is not just, and that this person created the individual human being and knows the individual human being and placed some of himself in the human being. There's a part of us that is God, actually. That is God. I think, Luca, we have touched very many important topics. We will have to come back on some of this because we didn't answer the question. But I think it's very important to explore where this question comes from. Or it will be very easy for me to say, I believe this, but that doesn't convince anybody. I think for our conversations, we have to open it up and say, what is people's experience, you know, and what are their deep questions? And in today's world, you see, what satisfied my father, who was a farmer, he died when he was 80, but he was a farmer, and he was in touch with nature, and he believed in God. And he would say, if he went out on a beautiful morning, he'd say, look at that, he'd say, it was a great hand that made all that, you know. He had a natural belief in God, because nobody was challenging him. The people around him believed also, and in the society. But now, you open internet and there are thousands of different views about something, and all valid, but people we're in a very different world. And now we need to be able to answer the question with deep conviction from inside. I have read that one theologian, you're a philosopher, you might know him, Karl Rahner. He said, the Christian or the believer of the future will be a mystic, or they won't be believers at all. Meaning, it doesn't mean mystic that we're walking around on a cloud, you know, but we have had some deep experience of the reality of God, of the reality of the spiritual world, some kind of experience. And if we have that, and if we can, we have to nurture it too. We have to nurture it. Like a child can have a gift for art, a gift for music, a gift for football, a gift for running. But if there's no opportunity to develop it, it can just die, So I think part of the answer to your question is we have to be able to ask these deep questions, and if we have some kind of answer, then we need to develop that ourselves, our own unique way. I think for today we have to finish, but we will go back on some of these questions again when we meet next time.
Correct.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
conversation,
you.
because I know you have studied a lot, and you studied philosophy, and you have knowledge that I don't have at all.
No.
And so I'm very, but I think we can finish for today,
Correct.
and we will talk again.
Thank you, Georgina.
And thank you. I'd love to speak to you again.
Thank you.